Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Institute for Australian Chinese Arts and Culture at Western Sydney University. My name is Jing Han. I'm the director of this institute. Before we start, I would like to acknowledge that we are on the country of the Baramatigal people of the Darug Nation and acknowledge their ancestors who have been the traditional owners of their country for tens and thousands of years. I also acknowledge and pay my respect to First Nations elders, past and present. More than a year in the making, we are now beyond thrilled to present RAC's exhibition of the year, Owen Leong's solo exhibition, Bitten Peach. This exhibition, as you have seen, is exceptionally rich, stunningly beautiful, and breathtakingly sensual. Before we will get more into uncovering this exquisite body of works, I would like firstly introduce the opening speaker, the Senior Deputy Vice Chancellor and Vice President of Western Sydney University, Professor Deborah Sweeney. Professor Sweeney leads three key divisions, research, enterprise, and global, of this university of 50,000 students and 4,500 staff. She provides leadership and a vision to achieve the university's strategic priorities for research, research partnership, entrepreneurial activities, and international and transnational education across the schools and institutes, as well as the strategic research initiatives. So you can imagine how busy Professor Sweeney is. In her schedule, every minute counts. We are very privileged and so delighted to have Professor Sweeney to open the exhibition. So please welcome Senior Deputy Vice Chancellor and Vice President of Western Sydney University, Professor Deborah Sweeney, to give the opening speech.
Thank you, Jing, for that kind opening, and I'm sure I am no busier than all of you are. We are all very busy people in today's world. So let me begin also by acknowledging the traditional custodians of these unceded lands, the Baramatigal people of the Darug Nation, pay my respects to elders past and present, and any Indigenous people with us here today. May we continue to peacefully walk together in gratitude, respect, and kindness as we care together for this country and for one another. So I am very delighted to be here tonight. Welcome you to our university, Western Sydney University, and most importantly to the Institute for Australian and Chinese Arts and Culture, and for the fantastic work that Jing has done and always does do to organise such spectacular events with such spectacular people involved. So it's a really great pleasure to be here for Bitten Peach, the solo show by the artist Owen Leong, who I had the pleasure of meeting very briefly as I came in. So in opening, I'd like to also acknowledge some of the very special guests here. And of course, each and every one of you is very special. But Kevin, our chair of IAC committee members, Minglu Chen and Ariel Zhen, thank you for your continued support. Professor Jocelyn Shea, our founding director, now adjunct professor here at IAC, thank you for your continued support. Guang Wei, as our adjunct fellow, Louise Guest, James Bradley, and I believe there are also a number of other artists who have previously exhibited here. And it's great to have you coming along and coming back and being part of our IAC family, if I can call you that. It's also great to see other Western Sydney University colleagues here, and I want to recognise distinguished Professor Ian Ang from the ICS. Ian has made the momentous decision to retire from our university after a splendid career with us, and it's great to see you here tonight. So thank you, Ian, again. But of course, the most important guest is the artist, Owen Leong, and the creator of these fabulous new works that are on exhibition tonight. Arts and cultural education has been an important part of our university's commitment to teaching, to learning, to research, and even to our students' experience, at the heart perhaps of our students' experience. Because it's by exposing students and opening up their minds to the diversity of creativity, artistic expression, how vital that has been to ensuring that we are working with them to develop their critical thinking and to shape their worldview. We want our students to be global citizens, and by exposing them to these areas as well as critical thinkers, this is the way that we can ensure that we're delivering on that mission. So it's through this exposure that students are encouraged to explore social, cultural, political, environmental, and other important issues which art offers a new and dynamic perspective on. It's only art that can integrate and explore the world and those within it in this very unique way. And of course, we are located in the most culturally and linguistically diverse centre in Australia. We play a leading role in our region's economic, social and cultural development, but it's through our teaching, research, industry partnerships and community engagements and events such as tonight's that we do that. So we believe arts and culture are essential to the well-being, to the cohesion and to the vitality of our culturally and linguistically diverse communities. As I've alluded to, it's over the years that IAC has developed a suite of really distinctive, innovative and impactful programs in arts and culture that allow the development of cross-cultural knowledge and to showcase that power of creativity. Today's opening of Owen Leong's Bitten Peach is the highlight of the 2024 program for IAC. For the creation of this solo show, the artist, Owen Leong, has received the support from the university through IAC's Che Fellowship, which has been established through a very generous donation. Owen has also received the support from the City of Parramatta through the Parramatta Artist Studios and support from the New South Wales Government through Create New South Wales. This continued support for our arts and culture programs and for our artists is vital to their sustainability. And tonight's artist that you have received such a wealth of support is really heartening that types of events like tonight will be able to continue. The artist, Owen, is a renowned multidisciplinary visual artist exploring counter-narratives of queer world making. His work navigates the body as a site of individual experience and a product of both social and cultural forces. As Owen states, at the heart of his practice is a belief in the power of art to transform the way we see ourselves and the way we see others. Now, Owen is not only exhibiting here, of course, he has exhibited and held, his collections are held widely throughout Australia, in the Art Gallery of New South Wales, through the various states of Australia, but also importantly internationally, whether in the UK, Singapore, China or Poland, you can see Owen's works. So it's my great honour and delight to be here tonight to open this incredibly beautiful and thought-provoking exhibition and to congratulate Owen and Jing and your team, small as it may be, here at the IAC for producing such a fabulous event for us to enjoy tonight. So I have no doubt you'll all enjoy it. You'll enjoy the rest of the program. And let me again just acknowledge the work of IAC and thank our artist for sharing his work with us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Sweeney, for this wonderful speech. And greatly appreciate your support. It says a lot about this university's vision, mission, and commitment. Our guest speaker today is Dr. Guan Wei. Dr. Guan Wei is an iconic figure in the Australian contemporary art scene and critically acclaimed internationally. His art is highly praised not only for its intellectual depth, artistic originality, humanity, and integration of a past, present, West, and East, but also for its sharp sense of humor, and above all, its unique Guan Wei style. In recognition of his outstanding contribution to Australian Chinese contemporary art, Western Sydney University awarded Guan Wei an honorary doctorate in creative art in 2021. Not long ago, his work, Sea, Sand and Stars, were featured in Vivid Sydney for everyone there to see. And last week, he was awarded the Visual Artist of the Year by Creative Australia. It was also Dr. Guan Wei who introduced me to Owen Leong in 2022. And Owen was featured in our exhibition commissioned by Willoughby City Council at the Incinerate Art Space. Now we are showing Owen's solo exhibition at our place, so there is no better guest speaker than Dr. Guan Wei. Please welcome Dr. Guan Wei.
Thank you, Jinghan, and yeah, everyone. And yeah, I know the Owen since maybe later 1990 and early 2000 something. When I was yeah, working with 4 galleries, and Owen yeah, also working in there like a student. Yeah, another time 4 galleries including Zhang Yang, Lindy, and myself, and like Melissa Zhu and Bing Hui. Yeah, another time is quite strong for the Asian community art centers. Yeah, they did a lot of things, including Owen's in there. Yeah, later on, looking Owen has some shows very impressed. I think in the 2017, I was working in China. China has a very special movement called Beauty for the Village. You know, every government give the money, the villager make some like art fair and special art. And in the 2017, I was working with a group in the Guizhou, southwest China. They asked me to look in some Australian artists join this group. And our contacts with Michaela. Michaela that time is the director with 4 galleries. Yeah, they invited like Owen and another 3 young Australian artists join the Guizhou, this lightning ceremonies. When they go there, they quite impressed because this very lonely village in the very special in the southwest. Yeah, this little towns, but it's very old history and very interesting. Yeah, and Owen joined these exhibitions, and also in the 2002. With the Jinghan organized a show in the Center Galleries. Yeah, I invited Owen join this show, including Tim Johnson and Tracy Moffitt and Owens and Jing Zhe and Zhang Huajie. Yeah, this exhibition, yeah, I remember Owen did very good the shows. And yeah, I just mentioned I know the Owen since a long time ago. I just followed him, looking his shows, and yeah, I can looking his development very fast, very quick, and did job is very well. And because this exhibition is very interesting, because he followed one of the Chinese famous traditional novels. But this novel called Liao Zhai, and the Liao Zhai, everyone knows Liao Zhai talking all about the ghost stories. Yeah, then but it's very interesting. But some ghost is like a female, is pretty and very nice. But also some the man like intellectual and a young man and with the ghost has a love story or something. And yeah, this very interesting the story. But this time, yeah, Owen used stories to making this exhibition are quite a surprise. Because I feel if you use the literature to make the visual art, it's quite different, you know, because in the literatures, you know, you're thinking like one lines, you know, they have the times in there. But if in the visuals, this is a space. You don't need, you just suddenly looking whole things, can emerge the feel everything. But the for story, you should be, take a little bit times. And also the literature use the characters, it's very abstract. But for the space, for the visual, this is quite a figurative or something. This is very different. And also from the literature change to the visual change to the literature is very difficult and very subtleties. But I think for the visual is more difficult, because visuals generally you can't just for some details. You must for the general feeling things. And I think this time the Owen did is a very good transfer for the visuals. This exhibitions in the specials just for this space, not only some picture and sculpture that's hanging there. And they designed for the whole space and the works. This work also including sculpture, glass, and also the curtain, some things. And I think while looking this exhibition, he make two things gave me very strong feelings. One is the big like tears, teardrops, maybe like water something. Every is the work, including the curtain and the sculpture, has soft teardrop. I think this is very good the images and the very good designs. This whole work has this the big trips things looking give you very special feelings, and this is one of the things. And also they have three flags or something. They also mentioned some Chinese the word. One is called 云雨雾月. And 分桃, they also has a very special meanings. They have some very subtleties, has a sexy, queers. And I think this exhibition is very, very attractive and fascinated for this exhibition. I think also Owen just very serious artist, very delicate, do everything details for this exhibition. Like this is the one, the hand, is the ground with the furniture. Furniture is wooden. This is like a Ming or Qing dynasty. They organize together, give you many, many imaginations, I think. And I think this talking, they has many, many meanings. Also very interesting about conscious and subconscious dialogues and the realistic and the dreamings dialogues. And also this exhibition including you feel is very pen, some is very pen, and also lonely. Also, this exhibition looking is very pretty. Anyway, I think I quite like this exhibition. I think for my opinion, since I'm drawing here maybe 3 or 4 years, I think the Owens are maybe the best one in this. Okay, thank you.
Owen, you got it, the best one. So he meant the literature and the visual. It's really insightful. He was saying that the literature is in a linear narrative. Tell the story, you have to read for a long time. Takes the time to get it. But the visual is a space, and then bam, in that space, you get it straight away. It's a very insightful, so full of compliments, and that's what you get. Thank you so much, Dr. Guan Wei. I always love his speech. Now we're looking at this. As I mentioned in the introduction, in the catalog, you see that one unique feature of this exhibition is a collaboration between the visual and literary disciplines. And for this one, it is really most divine collaboration I've seen. I didn't realize who Tom Cho was until Owen connected me up with Tom to discuss the Chinese translations of the title and some key concepts in his story. Then it dawned on me that Tom was the author of this book called Look Who's Morphing, a collection of fictions originally published by Giramondo in 2009, when the publisher, Professor Ivor Indig, introduced me to this wonderful book, which is impossible to forget once you see it. And not only because of the fascinating stories, but also because of this most striking book cover photo. And this photo was Owen's creative work. And Tom had commissioned Owen for this cover photo. And, such powerful visual reflection of who's morphing. So this is the second time of their collaboration. I'm sure there will be third. We have asked Tom Cho, who is also an artist of a spoken word performance, to record his own reading of the book. And Tom, like Owen, I said, Owen, your friends has to be as good as you are, otherwise they can't be your friends. So Tom, like Owen, is a master of his craft. He spent so much time refining this recording, including captions. So he has all my respect and admiration. Now, please let us enjoy Tom Cho's recording of his fictional piece.
The whole cannot be understood without reference to its wholes. 无缺亦无缘. In a village in what is now known as Toisan, there was a young scholar who was always reading and writing one thing or another. He read poetry and political thought from the Confucian canon, and he wrote essays and stories. On most evenings, he preferred to be in the world of his studio with a book or brush in his hand. Late one night, he was composing a lengthy essay when the lines of watery ink lifted off the sheets of paper around him. While the scholar looked on, all of the ink accumulated at a corner of his studio ceiling, forming a dark and surprisingly sizable cloud that was soon ready to burst. As the ink began raining down, it recomposed itself mid-air, stroke by stroke. First, the strokes formed an expressive outline, and then came a suffusion of colours and realistic details until, within minutes, there stood a young man in the flesh. Having just rained down into the room, the youth's ink-black hair was shiny with droplets. His skin was moist and dewy, and his wet clothes clung to his body. He introduced himself as Wu Ming, namely, nameless. For a moment, the scholar looked at the blank sheets of paper from where his writings had now disappeared. He had written some serviceable prose to theorize about the rhyming patterns in a volume of classic Confucian poetry. But Wu's beauty was better formed and more persuasive. The scholar put down his brush and walked over to Wu, who smiled and raised his head to meet the scholar's kiss. Wu stripped off his sodden garments, and the scholar followed suit. With his hastened breaths and flushed face, Wu indeed seemed a real flesh and blood lover. But when the scholar reached for the naked Wu, he found Wu's body extraordinarily permeable, forming moist openings wherever the scholar sought to apply pressure. These openings would stretch to accommodate any protrusion, enclosing it snugly, and when the scholar withdrew, the apertures would close over. Since childhood, the scholar had enjoyed gazing at both clouds and ink blots alike, projecting familiar images onto their formations. Wu had rained down from a cloud of watery ink, and yet his fluid nebulousness was like nothing the scholar knew. But Wu's permeability soon prompted the scholar to project many desires, familiar and unfamiliar to himself, onto Wu's form. And because he had holes anywhere that the scholar so desired, Wu proved to be a supremely receptive partner. The next morning, the scholar woke alone. Where Wu's body had been, dried blots were on the sheets. These blots and the spaces around them now indicated Wu's absence. Although he ached for Wu, the scholar had not been expecting Wu to linger. After all, clouds pass and cannot be pinned down. He also doubted that he would receive such a visit again from Wu or anyone, let alone with the frequency he now desired. He dared not hope that it was going to start raining men. So the scholar began finding other openings for his desires, the orifices of merchants, eunuchs, fellow scholars, maidservants, fox spirits and ghosts who took many forms, and guards in full leather armour who carried chains and cudgels. A hole that had been worn into a log by pelting rain, a long-necked vase and other favourably shaped ceramic and glass vessels, a lattice panel, a bitten peach, his own clasping hand. His studio was itself a concavity, Qing, that formed a shape in concert with its enclosing walls and the various objects inside the space, and the scholar came to spend even more time in the world of his studio, composing a new essay. Thinking of the spaces that are both created and left behind, he asserted in emphatic brushstrokes that the whole cannot be understood without reference to its wholes. On the days when he especially missed war and ached for wholeness, he proposed more radically that the nature of the body can only be understood as a whole. He termed his perspective yuanque, which years later should have been translated to holism, but was not. This is how this scholar came to be linked with another concept instead, one that stressed the importance of a thing or system as a whole, 整体, over and above its nature as a sum of constituent parts. In reality, the scholar's writings sprung from his tendencies to submerge parts of himself within a whole, where the parts and the whole could be in intimate interconnection, in turn creating depths within himself. He would spend the rest of his life exploring the contours of these depths too, knowing that wholes give shape to what a whole can be.
The last person in his credit that Tom thanks is voice coaching him to speak those few words of Chinese. So you can see how precise Tom, and he is very reflective of our artist as well. You may wonder what the Bitten Peach means, why we, Owen uses as a title of the exhibition. It is actually a story from anthology of writings by a very famous Chinese philosopher called Han Fei or Han Feizi, who lived in between 280 to 133 BCE during the Warring States period. So in this account, Duke Ling, Wei Linggong, ruler of the ancient Chinese state of Wei, has a favorite courtier and companion called Mi Zixia. One day when the two were taking a stroll, Mi Zixia picked a peach from a tree and took a bite. He found it so sweet that he instinctively handed over to the Duke Ling. Duke Ling exclaimed that Mi Zixia must love me so much that he forgot that he had taken a bite of the peach before handed to him the Bitten Peach. So Bitten Peach has since become an exclusive symbol of love between males. The Chinese term 分桃 has a dual meaning. It can mean share a peach. In this context, share a Bitten peach. And it also means split a peach. So language is very interesting. And Professor Stephen Fitzgerald, the first Australian ambassador to China, because I showed him this exhibition, he was so thrilled. But because of the health reason, so he couldn't come. But he shared a story with me. in relation to 分桃, which in that story, which is meant to mean splitting a peach. In the 1980s, an Australian fruit canning company negotiating a joint venture with potential Chinese counterparts. One part of the machine Chinese counterparts wanted to import from Australia was known in English in Australia as peach splitter. So you split into two and put in a can. After he said that, the Chinese assistant interpreter showed hesitation to translate it. When pressed, he said, there's only one way of translating it, 分桃机, peach. And he quickly added to say, oh, it doesn't mean share a bitten peach. It means splitting the peach. Oh, okay. Because the 分桃, you can't use the 分桃to mean split the peach anymore. It becomes so symbolic. So I would now like to invite the leading character of today's event, artist Owen Leong, on stage for a conversation. The first question, did you always know that you wanted to be an artist? And any specific moment or event that made you believe you would become one?
Thank you, Jing. I think as a second generation born in Australia, Chinese, there's a very specific environment that I grew up in where my family they're the kinds of people that feel very deeply, and I feel very deeply. But growing up, there was an inability for me to articulate my emotions to my family and vice versa. So there wasn't maybe a particular moment of wanting to be an artist, but there was an impulse throughout my life that I wanted to communicate very deeply, deep emotions. And so I think I was drawn or gravitated towards the arts as a way to express that, because art can say so many things that words cannot. And it can make all of us feel things, whether it's music, books, visual arts. It can make you feel things beyond speech, beyond words. So I guess that I have my family to thank for that, in the sense that that pushed me towards being an artist.
So your parents had no opposition to you become a starving artist?
Oh, on the contrary, they had many oppositions, because as is expected of a good Chinese daughter or child, that you have to be really a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant.
Or engineer.
Or an engineer, all of those good things which we need in the world. But, you know, as a good son, I studied extremely hard and I went to a really great school and I got excellent marks. And then when I graduated from Year 12, I said, Mum and Dad, I got this amazing mark. Here you go. Now I'm going to go to art school. And I have them to thank for that, because they're incredibly stubborn people. And I love them. They're such wonderful people, but they have this tenacity and very stubborn, which I inherited. And actually, you need that tenacity in order to be an artist, because there are so many things along the way that can trip you up or swallow you whole, or you could disappear into, a void. So you really have to have that tenaciousness to persist as an artist.
You are also obviously very smart as well, as a strategist. And being an artist is a long process, and it's not easy. It's not like, oh, you wake up and then you become an artist. So looking back, when was the hardest time in your artistic career, and what did you do to pull through?
I've been an artist for maybe 20 years. If there's like the rise and the fall of any career, and in all of our lives, we all know what it feels like to go up and down in your journey. And for me, I suppose, was a really long period of creative block during lockdown. Maybe in 2 or 3 years ago, there was 11 months of creative block, which is quite excruciating. It's quite a painful, excruciating feeling for anyone that's creative, to not be able to bring forth that energy inside you that brings such life, whether it's writing or music or art. And it was quite painful. And so you have to just turn up every day at the studio. You have to go about, your methods and hope that it comes back. And really, what I ended up doing was, I think that most artists have a really powerful intuition, an internal navigation system. That's your artist's intuition. So I had to trust in listening to that when it sends like a ping, or like there's things that like come up. And if you listen very carefully to your internal navigation system, it'll guide you through the darkness. And really what it was telling me was that after practicing with photography for 15 years or so, I actually wanted to make sculpture. I think I felt this inundation and saturation with digital imagery, and just, it was a lot of imagery. And I actually wanted to be grounded in my hands and the making. So really I ended up wanting to make sculpture. Once I made that decision to make sculpture, everything just flowed again. So I would say that was probably the hardest part of having a creative block of that period of time.
It's really interesting because many people experienced a burst of creativity during the COVID because finally they're locked in. You can't do anything else about being creative. But then obviously it can be the other way around. That's really interesting. You are a multidisciplinary artist working across sculpture, painting, photography, installation, and video. And your body of works so far have covered a wide range of mediums that you used. Why do you feel it's so important for you to explore different disciplines and using different medium in your practice?
I think the artwork the artwork always dictates what material it wants to be. So again, when you listen to it, it will tell you. And if you try and make it a certain way, it won't work. So if you tune into the actual idea or the concept at the root or the base of the artwork, it will blossom into the material that it needs. And so this year I ended up, doing this amazing project, and I ended up doing glass blowing, leather craft, sewing, metal welding, all these amazing things that some of those elements have ended up in the show, but others are skills that I will absorb into my practice, and it will come out. I know it will come out in another show, another project, because it circulates. Those skills and that learning and those ideas and forms and materiality will circulate and come out in another way.
Do you feel like you need to constantly using different ways of doing art to get stimulated?
Yeah, absolutely. I think another important element is the curiosity element. So when you listen to the curiosity within you as an artist, it kind of guides you like where you want to take your practice. And that's the joy as well of making, is that you're constantly being curious about the world around you and processing your experiences around you, the people that you meet, the conversations that you have, the politics, the things that happen around you. You process it through your art. And that's how the materiality of the work comes through.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting. One of the Saturday when we were doing so much texting, and Owen said, "Oh, I won't be able to contact you after 9 o'clock. I'm going to attend a sewing workshop." I said, "Well, after 4 o'clock, I won't be able to contact you because I'm going to attend a community event." And then in the evening, we compared the notes, and he's so excited. He said he learned so much about sewing. I said, "Well, mine is not as exciting as yours." And I thought, I wish I was Owen. Yeah.
What I like about learning is actually the beginner's mind. So I love going into a space where I don't have to be perfect, because as an artist, you often are required to have a high level of discipline, and you have to deliver and hit your mark in terms of your show, your book deadlines, your music album, all those things you have to hit perfectly. So when you're going to a workshop where you're an absolute novice or a beginner, it's completely open. It's wonderful to be a beginner and to have a novice mind and to just learn things. And I think that beginner's mind is really refreshing and something that I'll take into the future.
Oh, that explains. But often, Owen hit the marks. It's so important to him. He lifts us too to hit the marks. So
kept you accountable, Jean. Yeah.
So we learned so much, and I'm sure, our marks are being lifted.
Likewise.
Yeah, thank you so much. And following on the last question about the sculpture, in this show, there are so many types of sculptures. You have used a great variety of materials, which I found quite eye-opening. You use glass, bronze, rosewood, porcelain, steel, candle, cotton, bleach, silk, chain, and foxtail. Two parts of the question. Do you believe that art materials is in the eye of the artist, as love is in the eye of the beholder. So you see everything as art material. And how do you find and source your materials? Two questions.
Well, I think art materials exist in physical space. So I'm drawn to the materials for their particular symbolism or their luscious materiality that might conjure a feeling or an emotion in the work, or it might transmit an idea through the work. But also, I understand that we all have different perspectives. And so when someone looks at a work, that object exists in space between us. And so when they come to it, they will see the materials and they will have their own responses, because everyone has their own baggage and their life lived experience that they bring to that piece. Is that kind of what you're asking?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And how do you source them? You know,
Oh.
do you go to like a flea markets to?
Oh, no. Yeah.
Or do you go to Kmart?
Sometimes Kmart's an artist's best friend. Yeah. It depends. So there are some elements of the materials that are more practical, and then obviously you go to Bunnings or whatever, they're more just material things, base things. Other times they're more precious. So things like glass, you actually have to go to a special glassworking hot shop. And I went to Canberra, the very famous Canberra Glassworks, in order to do some private classes with a glass artist there and to shape some of the things that I wanted in this show. The bronze is a very technical thing. You need to go to a foundry. And so at a foundry, they are technical experts that bring some of those ideas to life. And I work closely with Matt Crawford to bring some of my sketches to life. And you'll notice in the key hero image of the hand, the claw with the drips coming out the top, when they cast it, that actually was a mistake. And so, but they didn't cut it off because they know me. We've worked together for many years. And when I arrived that day to check the pieces, Matt was like, "Oh, I want to show you this thing." Now, the ceramic shell broke. And I'm like, "Oh no, that sounds terrible," because you only have one shot, right? But when he showed it to me, he's like, "We thought that you might like this." I'm like, "I love it. Thank you for not cutting that off," because the drip, like Dr. Guanwei mentioned, is repeated as a motif throughout the whole show. And so it was just the universe, the art universe, smiling down upon this piece and giving it a drop of bronze that I really didn't expect, but perfectly finished the piece.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so interesting the way that you see the materials and how it represents. For this exhibition, you are inspired, as the one we mentioned as well, and as well as in our introduction, inspired specifically by this Chinese classic called Stranger Tales from a Chinese studio, 聊斋. And there are many other very well-known Chinese classics, as we all know, such as Journey to the West, 西游记, Romance of the Three Kingdoms, 三国演义, and Dream of the Red Chamber, 红楼梦, all those. Why and how did you land on Stranger Tales?
You know how before I was talking about like the internal navigation system that artists have, and it's like that when you encounter something in your life, there's like a sound of a chime or a triangle that goes bing. And so when I've encountered the Strange Tales before, which is a towering classic of Chinese literature, I think maybe the first time was this very famous film from the 80s with Anita Mui and Leslie Cheung called Rouge. And it is a ghost story. A scholar falls in love with a ghost. So that was the first time I was just like, I had that sound. Another time was when I met Geng Shui, the amazing Chinese porcelain artist who makes video works. She was also inspired by this book. And when it happens in a second time, you know that something's coming. Yeah. And so I think I met her in China and she was explaining her work when we went on a residency there. And actually the third time was when she had her exhibition at IAC. Yeah. And she gave her talk and she mentioned it again, and it was the third time. And so when we had our conversation and you invited me, I felt like it was the moment to sort of try and tap into this amazing piece of literature and see what I could do to it through my lens as another generation in another country, in another culture. How could I reinterpret and reimagine this text?
It's kind of not surprising. As I mentioned in the introduction, the Nobel Prize winner, Mo Yan, is most inspired by that book. And he said it's the best book, full of imagination, and which is so true. And then you read and you reread, it's timeless. And It's a wild imagination, but also quite fascinating. Also in that stories, because you the works that you do is specifically inspired by selection of stories, specific stories. So my question is, how did you do the selection? So because there are 70 stories in that book and in the English translation, or the stories were just randomly picked?
No, I actually read all stories from front to the start to finish. And again, I was looking specifically for phrases, material objects, or anything in the text that would give me that that kind of like glimmer. And then I would record those objects or phrases, and then they became sketches. So the ones that I collected, I reviewed them, and they became the seeds for the sketches. Then the sketches became reviewed again and became a selection for the show. And then they started the process of the making and the experimentation, and then it rolls that way.
It is really interesting because as Guanwei mentioned, that your focus is different as a visual artist, is about space, and as a literary person, ours is a linear narrative. But after I saw your artwork and then I reread the book, wow, I found so many things that I didn't see before. And then
highly imagistic. I mean, when you read the stories, there's so many powerful images like within the text.
Yeah, it's a fascinating, and how rereading or different media, different disciplines influence each other. My next question is, in your statement, you refer to your reading of Stranger Tales as a queer reading. Can you elaborate on that? And also, do you see your art transcend gender, sexuality, and racial identity?
That's a really big question, Qing. Probably answer in several parts. Firstly, yeah, I can only speak from my lived experience. I don't speak for the entirety of my community. I think our role is as people and as neighbors and friends is to contribute to a conversation through whatever we do in our lives or our work that elevates and supports each other to build community. So my work is only one small, tiny little speck in a bigger conversation across all of the things that we do that create dialogue amongst people who are interested in listening for what's being said. When I say I did a queer reading, I think we have to acknowledge that I guess these days in the 21st century, queer has maybe been sort of mainstreamed into representing everything that's gay or lesbian. But if you think about the word queer, the origins of it were actually used as a homophobic slur. So it does have a negative connotation. The power of my community, the LGBTQIA+ community, is that we can reclaim words or weapons that are used against us and turn them into something else. And so the word queer was reclaimed as a way to empower and give ourselves agency. And so these days you see the very result of that action. And I'd like to say that, like, to do a queer reading, it's not a passive thing. To queer something, it's an action. It's a political action when you really, really dig down into it. And so when I did a queer reading of Strange Tales, there's two things happening. There's the text, which is this incredibly respected classic of Chinese literature that I highly respect. But in my lived experience, I wanted to do an action to that text in order to just reimagine some of the things in it. So in some ways, the text it does contain highly moralistic, binary kinds of things around gender. And I wanted to reimagine these fox spirits and ghosts and demons as kind of like otherworldly beings that are sort of genderless or of sublime beauty and form that are sort of like seeking enlightenment through sensual pleasure. So there's like a spin in the way that you queer a text. And then that was the initial action. And then reinterpreting and translating that into the works in the show was my job as an artist.
Well, you can see that how eloquent he is and articulate.
Makes sense.
Make perfect sense. It's so well said, So Interesting, and also Professor Sweeney mentioned in the opening speech, because you said in your statement that in the heart of your art, you have this belief in the power of art to transform the way we see ourselves and others. And obviously, this is a very powerful statement. Can you illustrate this belief with an example? Is that related to this pleasure activism?
Yes, pleasure activism. So I think everyone can remember an encounter with art that has transformed them emotionally, or in any kind of way, whether you've listened to a beautiful piece of music that brought you to tears, or read a book that made you think something completely different. And in my situation, when you say pleasure activism, yeah, it was this amazing book that I read during that time of creative block and during lockdowns, by Amy Marie Brown, who is an amazing African American writer and cultural theorist who wrote Pleasure Activism, and it poses this amazing idea that our pleasure can be used to sort of elevate and sort of like give ourselves power and agency. And I understand that, like, you know, protest and marching and those kinds of actions are all important. They're very important. But what blew my mind was that you could flip it and also use something, say, for example, with queer folk, where sexuality has been used to oppress, imprison, yes, even kill and murder these days, that something that has been used to oppress you, you could take that idea of your body and its pleasure and use it in a way that shows people how much power is contained in celebrating your body, our bodies, our communities, that you can use that in a really powerful, politically active way. Yeah.
Being Chinese, I must ask
Yes.
a blunt question.
Oh, ask away. What I've loved working with Qing is that it's like working with my mum.
I take it as a
Yeah,
compliment.
it is a compliment. It is a compliment. Yeah.
I tell my children. Do you care if people don't understand your art?
I think art is like a language, like any other language, like math, like music, Mandarin, Cantonese. It's a language, and all of us speak a language or more, and we have passing acquaintance with other languages and dialects and sub-dialects within a language. For example, Mandarin has so many different dialects. So art is a language, and when you come look at a piece of art, you may speak the language. Like what I really loved about Dr. Guanwei's observations was that as an esteemed artist, his perceptions and insights strike right to the core of the language. We speak the same language. I love hearing the feedback of my fellow artists because I know that we speak a shared common language. When other people come to the work, everyone's got different fluency in that language. And so the point at the end of the day is that we're trying to communicate with each other, whether you speak the main language, a dialect, or you don't speak the language at all. We're trying to talk to each other. And so if you're open and receptive to what the work is showing you and telling you, there's communication at the end of the day.
Very open-minded, yeah. I have this question that I must ask. You know, you are very innovative, and as mentioned, you keep moving and then get inspired, and then you changing your creation style and moving into new territories constantly. In the fast food industry, as we know, there is such a thing called a bliss point, where they get every ingredient to the perfect point that you go back to eat that food all the time, like a French fries, you know, so you always go back. So that's called a bliss point to ensure this continuous process, success. But you don't follow this rule, and you show no hesitation, as far as I can see, from jumping into the unknown, which can be risky in losing your fan base or market. What is that gives you this confidence and a courage to be so free in your artistic pursuit and creation?
There's so many different elements to that. I suppose at the end of the day, there are so many pressures from industry or commercial impulses or pressure for an expectation from others that you have a singular voice that is instantly recognizable, because then it's marketable. But for me, the interest lies in maintaining the curiosity at the heart of my practice, because it's like a life source. And you want this sense of constant renewal through your engagement with that life source inside you, which is the practice. And the practice of the art, like meditation, is that the deeper you go, the more you discover in this internal dialogue you have with your practice. So that's what allows me to keep looking for the new materials, the new ideas, the things that engage me or make me want to dive in. It's that sound of the triangle, bing, and I'll follow it down that path.
You don't have a fear?
Oh, I have fears all the time. Yeah, many fears of, artists are highly sensitive people and empathic people. So I have many fears constantly of being rejected, of being, ostracized, excluded. But at the end of the day, I think one of the strengths is that as a queer person of color, I've experienced that in my life. Walking around in my daily life, just going about my business, I've been rejected. So my art is a safe place. It's a sanctuary. It's where I get to be empowered, and I get to decide what happens with the work and the story that I tell about myself. So I have no fear when it comes to that, because I'm free.
So enlightening. My last question, Guangwei also referred to the space, because Guangwei specifically mentioned this art exhibition so beautiful is because it's really not only about the artworks, but also the position, the space, how you use the space. And for this art, for this exhibition, Owen actually came in the first place to look at the space and sussed up, and then came back to have another look. And then when the work is done, he came again. And when the installation started, he spent 2 days, measure so detailed. Can you tell us, so it's really to guide us kind of visually, how you envisage viewers see this exhibition?
Just as Tom's essay, everything works as a whole, but also there's the negative space and the way that the viewer moves through the gallery. So there's dynamic levels, there's floor-based pieces that go up to suspended pieces, and also all the way back to our original conversation a year ago, where you were like, now one thing, Owen, you cannot drill into the walls.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Like, this is a very interesting challenge, but what a wonderful challenge, because as a container for an artist to work within, that limitation creates the opportunity for me to think, I will just suspend everything, which is incredibly difficult and hard, as you saw, but creates an incredibly beautiful floating show that conveys the sense of the stories, which is this haunting Asian Gothic fantasy with all these spirits and creatures floating around. And it's about the lighting, which we spent ages on, and the flow through the space and that experience of moving through the works and experiencing the materials.
Yes, obviously you have conquered the challenge, because Ami said the artworks are not on the wall. So it's, it has made all the difference, because previously. So
thank you for that original challenge, provocation.
I will give you more. Let's give a round of applause to Owen. It's a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much. So now I'm going to introduce our closing remarks speaker. That is Professor Jocelyn Chey. Before Professor Jocelyn Chey became the founding director of this institute, she had more than 20 years of outstanding diplomatic career. Professor Chey began her career as a lecturer in Chinese studies at the University of Sydney. And he went on to her many distinguished diplomatic posting appointments, which include the first cultural counselor in the Australian Embassy in Beijing, senior trade commissioner in the Australian Embassy in Beijing, director of the China branch of the International Wool Secretariat, and consul general for Australia in Hong Kong and Macau. As a China specialist, Professor Chey has continued making key contributions to the field of Chinese studies. Her current research fields include cultural diplomacy with relevance to China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan, and the cultural aspects of Chinese humor. Through a very generous donation, as mentioned by our Senior Deputy Vice Chancellor, RAC has established the Che Fellowship, named in the honor of Jocelyn Che and also her late husband, Mo-Lin Che. The goal of the Che Fellowship is to support the arts by fostering collaboration between artists and RAC, and this collaboration has yielded this brilliant exhibition. So please welcome Professor Jocelyn Che, AM, to give the closing remarks.
Thank you, Jing, and thank you everyone for coming to this excellent exhibition. And I also would like to acknowledge the generous donor who has funded this fellowship. Apart from it helping artists such as Owen with their work, it also gives me a bonus, which is that it maintains my connections with the Institute and with Western Sydney University. And it's great to have a particular reason for coming back and catching up with everybody here and seeing how the work of the Institute is flourishing. And I wish it all the best for the future. It's certainly getting a reputation across Sydney as being a hub for exchanges between Australia and Asia, including the Sinosphere. And as been mentioned by everybody, we have a very excellent exhibition opening this evening. I would like to give my personal congratulations to the artist, Owen, and I'm very pleased that he is able to benefit from this fellowship. I'm also very pleased that he's chosen as a subject for his work the Liao Strange Tales from Chinese Studio, because this work takes me back to my original study of Chinese, which was being immersed into classical Chinese literature. And that's when, as a student, when I first came across this work, stories by the collector or author Pu Songling in the Qing dynasty. Rereading them, because I was coming here tonight, I find them still very intriguing and even unearthly. And there's nothing really like the Liao Jai in Western literature. They often described as ghost stories, but Western ghost stories like Henry James's The Turn of the Screw are nothing like Liao Jai. Sometimes people call them horror stories, but they're nothing like Western horror stories like Bram Stoker's Dracula. You might think it's a kind of science fiction, but it's nothing like, say, H.G. Wells's The Time Machine. You might think it's a kind of historical romance, but it's nothing like, let's say, Colin McCulloch's The Thornbirds. The closest parallel I can think of in English literature would be Alice in Wonderland, or perhaps C.S. Lewis's The Chronicles of Narnia. These are stories in English which, like Liao Jai, show us a fantasy world of magic, mythical beasts, talking animals. Now, you and I every day have to contend with the traffic, with the vagaries of state governments and news about wars and famine, and all these things that seem to beset us in this world. We often feel that we're despairing and there's nothing we can do to put matters right because we are too small and it's all too much for us. Let's just give up. But we actually, reading the Liaozhai, it seems an odd way to solve the problems of the world, but it does teach us something. It teaches that justice in the end will prevail. The good will be rewarded and the evil will be punished. The essays in Liaozhai are actually very moral stories. It seems to be like, there's a material world is like just a thin crust. And underneath it, there are the immense forces of spiritual power that are going to break through and resolve everything. One of the earliest translators of the Liaozhai was Herbert Giles. He's selected 164 of the stories and published them in 1916, which was right in the middle of the First World War. Herbert Giles had been a diplomat. He served in Taiwan. That was where he studied classical Chinese. After he went back to England, he became the professor of Chinese at Cambridge University and was there for several decades. He was a man, everybody described him as a very stubborn, strange, opinionated man. Strong beliefs, and he was a Freemason. Freemasons are both open-minded in that they don't just believe that Christianity has something to tell, but they will accept Jewish or Muslim faith as well. And they also believe that there is a strict moral code and everything is conveyed to you in symbols and allegories. I think Giles was attracted to the Liaozhai because he interpreted the stories of the Liaozhai in the same way as a Freemason might interpret his own symbols. In the preface to his translation, he said that the value of the stories was that they glorified virtue and censured vice. And he particularly based his translation on an edition by a Qing dynasty scholar called Dan Minglun. And he quotes in his preface from Dan Minglun, who said, there are two kinds of things. There are regular natural phenomena like solar eclipses, the migration of birds, fights between dragons, very natural phenomenon that. Well, you wouldn't call any of those, Dan Minglun, they're not marvels. But there are also irregular phenomena like climate change, wars and rebellions, things which cause harm to humankind and are definitively evil. Those are the marvels. And the stories of the Liaozhai show the difference between those two types of things. So the original version of the Liaozhai had 500 stories in it. And they cross this boundary between this world and the spiritual world. They describe a kind of spiritual space. And in typical Chinese tradition, they don't just leave that space empty, but it has moral qualities. Just to give you a couple of examples, in one story, an unsuccessful student finds comfort from a beautiful fox fairy. In another one, a stranded traveler is attacked at night by a corpse. A Taoist priest subdues the evil spirits because he has superior virtue. Nothing is what it seems. There's a spiritual quality to everything. Dan Minglun explained that the fox fairies and the ghosts weren't in themselves evil, but the climate change, the wars and hostility, the discrimination against people who are different were evil because they caused harm. A faithless husband in a Liao story would be abandoned, serve him right, by his lover. A student who was supposed to be studying for his exams, but was distracted by a love affair, would end up losing his heart and also failing his exam. A high official who had an affair, and we've all seen some of those, in the Liao inevitably would come to a bad end. So in the world of uncertainty, when we are every day not sure what's true and what's false, what's a fake and what's misinformation, the moral of the Liao stories is clear. Do what is right and just. And also remember the good old Scottish prayer, from ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties and things that go bump in the night, good Lord, deliver us. So having seen this beautiful exhibition, I'd just like to conclude by saying that one thing that I was reminded of was that there was a famous play by Shakespeare about a ghost. You know the one I'm speaking about? Hamlet. And there are two courtiers in one scene in Hamlet who are discussing, was that really a ghost of the old king that we saw? And one of them, Marcellus, says the following, which I'd just like to read. Excuse me, I put on my Shakespearean voice. Some say that ever against that season comes wherein our Saviour's birth is celebrated. He means Christmas. The bird of dawn sings all night long. And then they say, no spirit dare stir abroad. The nights are wholesome. Then no planets strike, no fairy takes, nor witch hath power to charm. So hallowed and so gracious is the time. So, as this is also coming into the season that leads up to Christmas, I like to conclude by wishing you all happy Christmas.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn. And, you know, I'm sure now, right after this session, and then when you go back to see the exhibition, you get to see loads more. So every single speaker speaks, including Owen, tells us a lot more things that we didn't know before. So, and I have to congratulate myself for inviting all the right speakers. So I'm so good at that. It's really, really wonderful. So I must thank my IEC for Women team, Sally Bowman, Yenny Liu and Lindsay Liu, and our lawyer and generous volunteers, PhD students Gao Wa and Cai Jingying, and also our former student Alicia, who was taking photos. And most of all, Owen, you know, you are the leading character of this show. So thank you so much for this amazing exhibition. Please bring more viewers, your friends and colleagues, anyone to come to see the show. We are open Monday to Friday, 9:30 to 5. Until 18th of December when the university have a mandatory shutdown. But we'll be back on 2nd of January. We won't have a much break. So please come to visit us. And we will also organize another public event in relation to the exhibition sometime in February. So we will send out the invitation to you all, and hopefully you will be able to come. Thank you so much for coming and for your support. Have a good evening.